Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovations Legal GenAI Around the World series. Absolutely delighted to be landing in Africa and the Middle East for this session, and I'm going to introduce you shortly to these wonderful panelists that are going to take us on the GenAI journey in their respective countries and regions. I'm Terry Modderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law. So let me introduce these amazing panelists. Firstly, Peter Hall, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Cognia Law. Peter, welcome. Wonderful to see you. And then we have Leah Moulasedi, who is the founder of Contract Alchemists. Lovely to have you as well, Leah. Thank you for joining us. And last, but certainly not least, is Katie Huang, who is legal counsel at Johnson & Johnson. Welcome, everyone. Fantastic to have you here. I wanted to kick us off today by talking a little bit more about you, because we're all at different stages of our GenAI journey personally and our organisations, depending on kind of what we're doing. So I wanted to get from you, each of you, a little about your background, but also where you are personally and where your organisations are in terms of the legal GenAI journey. And Leah, I've saved this very first question for you to kick us off.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. So I'm a lawyer. I've been admitted for 12 years now. And my focus for the past couple of years has been specifically on legal technology. But with the uprise of GenAI, obviously we go where the market tells us. And so what I focus on right now with Contract Alchemists is actually taking law firms and legal departments through that journey. So it's either in the form of actual training or connecting them with legal technology providers that actually work to solve the particular problems that they have, or literally just empowering them. Actually just released a new course on prompt engineering specifically for them, because I think that's a great segue, great entry point for them, irrespective of what type of AI challenge they're having.
Yeah, as I was just listening to that, I'm thinking you might have a job for life, Leah. I think that, you know, it's such a big amount of education, just that spot, much less anything else.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Peter, you know, your journey is probably slightly different, obviously kind of having a very close connection to tech, but you come to that with a history as well. So tell us about you and who you are.
Yeah, I'm Peter Hall. Good to really be part of this. It's wonderful to chat about it in terms and the context of Africa, because I think it's often a forgotten area, but very much, as we'll talk about, a key area, I think. My background, well, firstly, CEO of Cognia Law. I'm based in the delivery center in Cape Town. My background's actually a finance background, but I've been involved in finance and operational roles across both very small startups through to large global investment banks. So really seeing end to end about how things change. And what's been consistent through those different roles is how do we apply technology to really enhance businesses and develop how we do things? And you know, it's really interesting because everybody's talking about AI as this amazing new thing, but we've had all these technology developments through time and lots of lessons learned that we can apply. I think on the Cognia side of things, you know, it's a really interesting time. And as you said earlier, it's something that's not going to go away. And, you know, we're very much seeing it around how do we digitize processes internally. That digitization includes AI, but it's also how do we use technology better? It's around helping clients understand this changing environment and taking them through the process is really critical. And then also working with different technologies to enhance what we deliver to clients. I think that's always a challenge for a business like ourselves, is remaining front of where all these developments are happening and applying the new technology at the right time. Because I think, you know, it can be really expensive to apply it too early, and clearly you don't want to apply it too late. So trying to work that out is a really exciting thing of what's going on.
You're absolutely right. We're right in the middle, and I know we'll get into this a bit more, but it seems that we're right in the middle almost of that balancing act at the moment, aren't we? And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into that discussion more. But first, Katie, it's great to have you here because, well, for many, many different reasons, but to have that in-house perspective, I think, because it is quite unique. So tell us about you and tell us about where you folks are at in terms of your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I'm really happy to be here. So just a little bit about me. So I'm Korean, but I'm originally from Canada. I've lived in the US, Abu Dhabi, and now I've been living in Dubai for over 7 years. So just from all over the place a little bit. I'm currently a legal counsel for Johnson Johnson, based in Dubai. We're not an AI company, obviously, but as you mentioned, it has been very interesting just from an in-house kind of multinational company point of view to sort of witness the company embracing AI tools and developing different AI tools in-house. And then really just kind of encouraging people in the company to use these tools to sort of make our processes more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And a beautiful segue into the next question that I want to ask all of you as well, by the way. Thank you for that. And that is to kind of just delve into the AI tools themselves a little bit. But I wanted to break that in a way into pieces, because it would be quite helpful, I think, to understand where legal AI is, just how that sits at the moment in terms of Africa and the Middle East, and then maybe get into a little bit more around the tools and the use cases and whatever the case may be. So I wanted to, Leah, if I could just go back to you on that first part and maybe ask the question this way. How vibrant is the legal AI development scene in Africa? And I'm going to come back and ask you the same question for the Middle East in a second, Katie. But Leah, if we start with you.
Thank you. I think there's a big divide in terms of the big firms, what they're pushing, their resources and their ability and capabilities. Whereas, for example, you look at, so this past week, I was with the Law Society of Zimbabwe, one of our neighboring countries, and my topic was solely on AI. And none of them were using AI or even engaged. In fact, for most of them, it was the first time that they were actually linking, because they hear the buzzwords, but there's a disconnect between the theory and the practicality of it. And so for me, I think we are still at a very early stage if we're talking about the majority of us. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen before you can actually say implement, because unfortunately, we're still stuck in our ways. We still want to write, we still want to type, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just that it can be done more efficiently with the use of AI. So for me specifically, I think it's there, it exists, there is actually an interest. I mean, you see it with the bubbling of not only with my ability to have demand with the type of work that I do, but institutions like LIT, which is the Legal Innovation Institute run by a lawyer here in South Africa. She literally just has courses on legal GenAI. That's it. And she gets demand. So it's there. It's just that people are just trying to figure out, is it real?
Yeah.
Does it work? And what does that look like for me? The bigger guys, I'm not going to talk. I mean, they're probably experimenting and doing amazing things, some of which I work with. So it's two different gaps, in the market.
Yeah, I think I've been referring to that almost as the digital divide, right? Which is, which I guess around time could change from a gap to a chasm, depending on kind of where you sit. But thank you for that. Peter, let me ask you this as well, and obviously with Africa in mind here. But what is the development scene, for want of a better expression, the startup scene in legal AI like in Africa? And I know this is something that you've been thoughtful about and quite passionate about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I totally firstly back what Leah's saying. There's a real gap. You've got the large corporations doing a lot of investigations into all of this, and other people that are just, I hope this goes away, and it's not. But having said that, I really see Africa as this absolute amazing place for innovation. if you look back, the whole payment tools, automated payment tools without cash and all of that really started out through a need in Africa and very quickly was solved and is totally adopted through Africa right now and now going to the rest of the world. So we're really good at this sort of stuff. So I see a lot of interest. I think the reality with AI, not just Africa and Middle East, but globally, is lots of interest, lots of really interesting discussions. But when you get down to it and say, well, are you really using it? There's not as much adoption. If I look at the technology and the development side of things, there's some amazing work. I mean, I was chatting to Hence AI the other day. They work with Palantir as their underlying platform, and their full development team is sitting in Rwanda. And amazing, amazing talent. I mean, they are world class. And I'm seeing the same, within teams that I work across the sort of Cape Town, South Africa operation. Really world class people. They know their stuff. They're developing amazing stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if some real innovation, not so much around the LLMs, the sort of the overall stuff, but around how do we really apply this to change the world of law? I think that's going to come out of Africa and has a good chance to do that.
Peter, if I could ask you just a follow-up question on that. Is the utilization or engagement of that talent at the moment predominantly through large global tech companies, or are you seeing that kind of break out, as it were, in individual, locally, regionally, maybe based talents?
Yeah, I'm seeing a bit of both. Clearly, the large global or the larger law firms that and companies that have instances in Africa are definitely investing and they've got teams looking at things. But if I look at similar companies to Cognia Law on the law company LSP side, most of them and many of them that have presences in Africa have got local teams working on developing stuff. We've got a team here that are really taking all this great stuff and saying, how do we start making a real difference to the clients through how we deliver solutions? And I think that's going to go throughout. There's also, interesting enough, a lot of companies. I was chatting to a company in Cape Town or further up the coast, and they've literally been involved in AI since the beginning and now have very much got into how do we automate and develop tools to do litigation, doc review, etc. And the real value is they can deliver stuff at quite a competitive rate. And so they've got a great solution, again, that can roll out. So I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting innovation, great tech talent here that want to work out of Africa. It's a lovely place to work from. And if you can work on the global stage from Cape Town, anywhere in Africa, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and going to what Leah was saying earlier, I guess, that the more you can leverage local talent, the more that talent's available to everybody to be able to embrace and actually use it. So, and I know we'll come back and chat a bit more about that. But Katie, let me ask you the same question. In the Middle East, what are you seeing in terms of AI? And I guess we always think probably that there's money in the Middle East to put into this kind of thing, and maybe that's right and maybe that's wrong. So set us straight. How vibrant is that? And how what are you guys doing? You mentioned at the beginning that you were embracing this. Tell us a bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, Terry, I would say definitely you're not wrong. I think, as far as the Middle East goes, it's an emerging market that has already put a lot of development and investments on attracting multinational companies, on attracting, global technology companies, and really trying to be kind of at the forefront of anything sort of related to technology, and this includes AI. I think in any market, in terms of legal AI tools, the kind of vibrancy of that can only be sort of, in correspondence with how AI in general is viewed in that market. And definitely in Dubai, where I'm currently based, I mean, you kind of see it all around. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of investments that are being made into different AI tools and not just legal AI. And I think we really kind of benefit from the multinational presence, because not only do you have, these local firms really being sort of brought up with this culture of, technology is really the future, but then you also get the benefit of these global firms and global companies where they've already sort of started the process of implementing AI tools in kind of their working process. So you get the benefit of both sort of local and global.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess working in-house with a company such as your own, legal is just a small part of a much bigger embrace of this sort of technology, particularly in the industry that you're in, I imagine too, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I know, we'll kind of discuss this a little bit more, but that's one of the difficulties, I think, right? Especially when you are working in-house. Legal does make up proportionally a smaller kind of function. It comes with a smaller budget when it comes to being really able to implement legal AI tools and making that sort of the focal point of your work process.
Yeah.
So that is I think a difficulty that's faced by most in-house legal departments.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, let me stay with you for a second and ask you this kind of follow-up question. How is Gen AI manifesting itself? I guess a use case or use cases, for want of a better expression, but how are you seeing that show up in-house, perhaps in your department, but in other in-house departments where you're located?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of really kind of helpful use cases when it comes to AI. I would say, there are certain aspects where it can be helpful and certain aspects where, it may not be very helpful because you need an actual lawyer to kind of bring value to the business. But in terms of kind of real life, use case examples, I've seen lots of, multinational companies use it in terms of, being able to summarize lengthy, documents or contracts. Many times in-house, we're kind of asked to give, very high-level summaries to our business colleagues, being able to advise on sort of a general kind of business level analysis, taking all of the sort of legal details out, but also still being able to deliver risks. And so I think, legal AI is quite kind of well developed for that, because sometimes you don't need, 50 pages of what this contract says or what this legal document says. I think another way I've seen it to be very helpful is, again, like with lengthy documents, just being able to sort of issue spot or kind of bring up certain legal provisions where it may take a lawyer 2-3 hours to comb through a very long document. It could take AI, seconds.
Yeah.
And so I think work where you have sort of complex or lengthy documents to be able to sort of shorten the time it takes for a lawyer to summarize or kind of take aspects of it out of the context. I think definitely legal AI is helpful and also really sort of freeing up valuable time for lawyers to be able to spend that time on kind of more strategic, high value work that they can provide to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And Katie, it may be too soon to have an answer to this question, so feel free to say that, please. But are you at the point yet of measuring those, I'm going to call them efficiency gains? I know they come with lots of different words attached to them. Or are you still kind of more in experimentation mode at this point?
I would say maybe more in experimentation. I think it will be very difficult to sort of have any kind of concrete measurement on efficiency, especially for in-house lawyers. For a law firm lawyers, I could see how, because they do kind of have the element of tracking their time, of billing, so they have some kind of metric to be able to sort of better see where their time is spent. I think with in-house, that's quite difficult. You're often being pulled into a million directions and you're never really sort of keeping your time, right?
Yeah.
So I think even as AI sort of evolves and the use of AI sort of increases in-house, that's one part I think will be still quite difficult for in-house lawyers, just to gauge, in any sort of metric,
Yeah,
how much this has really increased efficiency.
you're right. It's almost like the magic is going to be in the metrics somehow, but I know we'll chat about that a bit more. Peter, thank you for that, Katie. Peter, I wanted to ask you this question, and you started to mention some of them, like automation, and of course being used in e-discovery and various other things for a while. But where are you seeing those use cases bubble up most often?
Yeah.
If you could categorize them somehow, what would they be?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we work with both law firms and with corporates, and so
Yeah.
you're seeing different approaches. And I think law firms very much are seeing this as they need to be at the forefront of innovation. So they've often got in-house teams that are working with different ways to do things, and announcing associations with big, large AI tools and working with that in-house to get optimization. But I think it's largely driven by clients saying, okay, what are you doing? What can I learn from this? And how's that going to affect my bill? Because that's the bottom of the line.
Yeah, sure.
Within companies, I think it's quite an interesting one because, as you said, Katie, that the big thing we're seeing in-house teams moving from cost centers to having to be accountable. And within that, there also more and more work is moving to the in-house legal team. So risk, compliance, etc. And so that's increasing the workload, but the budget generally doesn't come with that. So the pressure for in-house legal teams is how do we deliver more with less? And often it's less with less, but more with less. And this is driving that whole, how do I do things smartly? Now, what I'm finding interesting is we've spoken to a couple of the corporates and they're going, well, that's great. We've implemented and we're testing all this great AI and the tools. But when I go to my teams and say, okay, now that we've spent a whole lot of money on the AI, how do we reduce the cost as that measure? And they're struggling. So I think that's quite an interesting thing. I think, where are we seeing it sort of working? We definitely, as a legal company, law company, is seeing in the litigation doc review side, AI is definitely made a big impression, and we're seeing less first round review coming to us, and I think that's sort of coming across the industry, and more second round review. Now, a lot of that, whether it's AI or really smart tech tools, and I again say it's all one, technology, AI is great technology. It's definitely having quite a large impact. Also seeing stuff in the whole contract automation space. I think it's innovation, but it's not quite there yet, but some really smart stuff going on that definitely will automate a lot of the doc contract negotiation, the contract creation side of things, and that's moving at pace amongst others, but interesting in those areas.
Peter, of the many things that you said then that were interesting and helpful, one I just want to pull out is this one around, I'm going to call it investment in the technology versus the cost of it, and just trying to work out how to balance that. And I think as we've been listening to these sessions around the world, I don't think anyone's arrived at that formula yet, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like you've got to invest the money to play with the tech to see whether it's going to be worth the cost. It's a chicken and egg situation almost. But I'm just before I jump to Leah on this question, just wondering if there's any other comments that you wanted to make there, or if you have a magic formula, please share it.
I don't have the magic formula. I think it's quite interesting because, again, speaking to some law firms, they're saying, here's my dilemma. I'm having to spend a lot of money to invest in Co-Counsel, Harvey, Palantir, all of those. The license costs are huge. And yet my clients are going, okay, I want you to move away from the per hour billing, and I expect it to massively drop because AI is going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
What a lot of people aren't understanding, it's not only the cost of the license fees, but it's each query has a cost. And when we're all using ChatGPT, on a personal basis, it's all free and close to you, and it's wonderful. When you start getting to scale, that starts really adding up. And getting that understanding between the sort of the providers and the users on a corporate basis is going to be a real challenge. Have we got the numbers? I wish.
Yeah.
That's the big source. So
But-
we don't know, where are we going to see those real benefits? And yeah, it's a tough one.
You're right. And it goes hand in hand with what we were saying earlier around that aspect of education or digital literacy, because you're never going to see the return if people don't actually use the technology or know how to. Leah, I wanted to save your comments on this till last, because these are all of the things that you're thinking about and considering when you go to your clients and they say to you, Leah, what should we buy? And which I'm sure they do. I'm sure that's a question that they ask. So where do you start in that journey with them to identify the use cases to overcome, I don't know, maybe that residual technophobia in a way, changing mindsets? How do you get all of that out of the way so you can actually encouraging them to have a go at the technology?
Actually last week I released a little cute infogram on the 12 hacks of change management. And that's literally what I use, because it's more than just, hey, this is cool, it'll solve your problems, here you go, and then you leave. And that's why even internally, even if it wasn't me as a consultant coming in and having internal champions and tracking and checking in on both the service provider and the client, like, hey, did they reach out? Hey, okay, let's have a meeting. What's going on? What's the holdup? What are we not getting right? Because there's a lot of excitement in the beginning, rightfully so, because of what they hear. And obviously, I'm an advocate for technology. Please, there's no way I will downplay it. But what I always caution them is that the adoption is such a nuanced thing, in the sense that it's actually a long-term journey. It's about understanding not only their pain points, but actually taking them through that hump by having those conversations, by celebrating those tiny wins, something that I think we, in our space, particularly in legal technology, we take for granted, because you already know this. You already know the benefits. You've seen it in other organizations. So the assumption is that this new person you're bringing on this journey should just get it. No, they won't, and it's okay. It's their journey. So ours is to be patient with them and take them through it, even if it means it's something. It's like for us in the traditional legal space where you're being legalese, you totally understand it and your client doesn't. Same concept. It's about breaking down that type of information, being able to actually speak to them in a way that they understand it, and translating the costs, the challenges, in a way that actually speaks to their own internal systems. Because sometimes everything is just so theory-based that people don't see, how will this change my life? It's as simple as changing an intake form. It seems like it's such a small thing for us, but in reality, it changes so many things. It saves so much time. So it starts like that. And then, because I'm a huge fan of phased implementation. You can't just dump a solution with everything and just expect for clients or users to simply just uptake it. So it's very phased, very nuanced, and finding them specifically at their pain point. So if their pain point is reviews, start with that. If it's drafting and that's what they're looking for, start with that. If it's, geez, we're getting legal requests from everywhere, start with an intake form. And then the rest will naturally follow, because once they start using that, that's actually like a baseline for your pilot, where you can get the benefits, you can get the ROI, and for them, it empowers them, because they are then in a better position to either go to leadership or whoever they need to say, hey, we used this for 3 months and we've seen the benefits XYZ, which, by the way, like for me, that's my job. I'm there to actually show them also the benefits of this is how actually you improved. Remember, we started at point A, you are now at point D. So that when they go back, they're like, we saved this much, in not only in money, but in time, in whatever that looks like. So it's a more nuanced approach. It requires a lot of tact. And my fear is most legal technology suppliers, they're just there to sell. So it's like, they should get it, just do it, get it over and done with. But the problem is, if a client is not using a solution, by the time you come back to renew the contract a year later or 6 months later, they'll tell you, I didn't see the value. You know why? Because they were not using it.
Yeah.
And there's an inherent responsibility either on you as a technology provider, or you have someone like me who can be the go-in-between, or find your internal champion, the one who will drive it, and call people accountable. A couple of months ago, I actually went to Salesforce conference, totally non-legal related, but I mean, we know the intersections between Salesforce and other CLM solutions. But I specifically went there because I needed to understand how such a giant of a technology partner could increase their adoption so well. One, they gamify it. Two, they create like a award system. They call them ranges, you know? And I mean, that's exciting. Imagine in your company and you're creating a game. You're like, guys, we need to do X, Y, Z. Here's the leadership board. I mean, it's just like Duolingo. I'm currently learning French. I think I'm getting there, but it's exciting because it's a game, you know? So it's about literally thinking out of the box and also taking in learnings from different industries.
Yeah.
The mishap for us in legal is we just think legal is legal, and it's not. You can take in key lessons from other industries too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was listening to you speak about Salesforce, and I'm reflecting on some of the other discussions we've had in this series, one of the things that we've seen and kind of identified is that the GenAI embrace seems to be kind of changing the nature of the relationship in a way with legal tech vendors and purchasers, in that seems to be becoming a little bit more collaborative. And what you've just explained from Salesforce is along those lines of you're engaging in the journey together versus, basically here it is and off we go. Are you seeing that start to develop in Africa? And I'm going to come with you on that question as well, Peter, and then to you, Katie, about the Middle East. Is that relationship changing, do you think?
One, yes. As you know, in another lifetime, I was also on the legal tech vendor side.
I do know that.
So yes, I actually do see that, and that's good.
Yeah.
Because for me, as a huge enthusiast of technology, you really can't see the benefits until you are in it. You are fighting with them in the dirt, in the muck, and figuring things out. Because more often than not, you find that they know there's a problem and they know there's a hype outside, but they don't know how to link the two.
Yeah.
And that's why I have so much respect for legal operational consultants or the implementation guys. I actually call them rock stars, because their job is literally to find out what is the problem, how do I deconstruct it, chop it into simplified ways that they can actually solve. And oftentimes you'll find the tech often sits lost. So it's figuring out the systems and processes and then laying the technology on top. And I think that's the only effective way that it will work, versus bringing in a solution and saying, scrap everything that you've been doing.
Yeah.
You're requiring a huge change versus just complementing very phased changes within the organization. So yes, I actually do see it. And that's a good thing though.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, you must be right in the middle of this question that I just asked, right? About the change in relationship, I guess, in a way. Are you seeing that? And do you, yeah.
It's a wonderful thing. And I just to follow Andrea's point, I just think the biggest thing that we miss with all of these is change management. We're literally asking teams to go out and get excited about technology, which they are very worried about is going to take their job. Now, that is a massive change management challenge, and we need to make sure that every single time we're working with this, we bring in change management and seriously invest in that, because that's the only way this is really going to work. So, and then to get back to the sort of bigger technology side of things, I think what we're also seeing is some of the larger companies are holding off investments in big contract management systems, etc., because they're going, not quite sure where this is going to end up and how do I want to see it. Actually, is a highly complex contract management solution the answer, or is it waiting a bit and actually all of that part will be automated and I just want to look at the data at the end? So I think that's interesting. But I think also when we talk about the sort of impact of AI and big technology, I think what as legal teams, both ourselves, law firms and the in-houses, need to go and look at how do we reduce risk and increase compliance across the broader organization using this technology without people realizing it. So, some great little examples that people can start doing. Most companies have looked at Microsoft Copilot and either have it integrated or look at that, and it's an easy way for the business to get involved. And within that, sort of create things around, we've seen companies using tools to be able to search all their policy documents. So for the end user, very simply, I can go into a little form and say, I've received this lunch from this client of this value. Is it in compliance with our regulations or policies? Now, those are simple tools. And once you start embedding that, then you can go to the team and say, guys, you might not realize it, but you've used AI. What this has done is it's reduced the load on your in-house legal team and increased compliance. Brilliant win. So we're seeing that sort of stuff. Marketing collateral. How do we use AI to develop succinct marketing collateral? Again, you can link it back to compliance and reducing risk. People and culture, generating profiles for recruitment, etc. So I think that's the biggest thing, is how do you get people to adopt this change without realizing it's actually changed? And then you're going, well, the last 3 months, all of that has come out of AI. So let's not be afraid about it. Let's embrace it and see what we can do. So I think it's really exciting. I mean, in the legal space examples, we're seeing stuff around playing with sandboxes. I think more and more companies are putting out sandboxes linked to tools, whether it's Harvey, CoCounsel, Palantir, etc. We're seeing a lot on the risk review side of things. I think AI has got a real application there to look at a contract base and start reviewing risks of groups of contracts. Contract interrogation. It's like Google on top of our contracts, but AI is really strong in that sort of space. So quite a lot of different ways. And I'm watching with interest what's happening in the whole contract management side of things, because that's moving at pace. You've got some companies doing amazing stuff there, which I think will change that whole space quite dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, just wanted to round out this question with you before we jump into another really big area, which is responsible AI. But before we jump in there, are you seeing kind of differences in the relationships that you have with tech vendors that you folks are using, and is that a plus as far as you're concerned, and if so, how? So just a quick round out from you and looking at the Middle East and in-house side on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, both Leah and Peter, they said it really well when, they were describing the need for tech vendors to really have that kind of relationship with their clients, whether it be in-house. And because there is so much kind of innovation and push for legal AI in the Middle East, that also comes with, there being a lot of sort of new legal tech vendors and in-house departments, getting lots of sort of marketing towards different technologies and different vendors wanting to onboard their systems into these multinational companies. And so there has been a shift. I think vendors are, really starting to realize that to have companies sort of adopt these tools, they need to essentially make, the lawyer's life easier, right? And Leah described the fact that it's helpful to have all of this be done in phases.
Yeah.
And I really kind of resonated with that because if I'm presented with an AI tool and I think it's going to take up additional time for me to be able to learn it, for me to be able to use it, if it's going to, you know, eat up more time than me just kind of doing the task manually, then I think I'm probably going to choose the manual part because that's what I've done before and it's not a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think tech vendors are, you know, sort of realizing that to make the transition kind of easier for their in-house clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it really has to be, or no one's going to play with it. And we want them to. We want them to get involved. We want them to play with it. So let me jump to responsible AI, and I'm good. This is like really kind of macro, I guess, in terms of where we've had or gone with the discussion so far. But and I'm going to come to you first on this one, Peter. But just kind of thinking about, I'm going to call it an AI strategy, which may also lead to regulations, which may also lead to standards and policies, and you know, however the cadence kind of works. And how all of that is developing in broad terms in Africa. And I guess the second part of this question, if I may pose it at the same time, is how is all of that in Africa going to be influenced by really a leading role? I think we could agree is being taken certainly by Europe, possibly also we'll see that in the UK, seen some of that in the US. How's that going to impact how all of that unfolds from the point of view of Africa? It's a big question, I know. So start or pull out those bits, whatever you would like.
Okay. I think we talked about it before, is this area is quite patchy. Different areas, different focus. You know, from my perspective, I'm watching with interest how the EU regulation pans out. And one of the things I'm hearing regularly from everybody across the globe is the regulators just are not on top of things. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's this industry or this space is changing so fast that how do you regulate it quick enough? And one of the interesting questions posed at an event I was at the other day is almost as companies and in-house teams, we've moved so far ahead of where the regulators currently are. Are we expecting when that regulation comes in that companies are going to have to wind back what they're doing in AI to meet the regulation? Now, I can't see many companies doing that. And that's the real difficulty. So I think the difficulty with Africa is how do you take what's global, and in my mind, I wish we could seen it's moving so fast, have one global standard, everybody adopts it and we can move on. And that would be my wish for Africa, is have a look what's been done in Europe, try and sense what's going to be in the next year or two so that we're in the right space and build that regulation so that we've got something that's not complex to put in place, not complex to comply, and can actually make that happen. I mean, it's very interesting watching Europe at the moment. There's innovation coming out of America, which doesn't comply with certain of the regulation in Europe. And the American companies are just going, okay, that's fine. I'll just turn it off. You guys can't get Apple's AI solution. The current position is they're going, fine, Europe won't get our AI solution. That's okay. We'll move on. So I think Africa's got to think about that a little bit. I think something I read on the weekend, which was quite interesting, which we need to bear in mind with Africa, is a lot of the African leadership across quite a few countries are quite resistant of regulation and technology developments that are coming elsewhere. And a great example now is the Starlink satellite, which is providing connectivity globally. And many countries in Africa are pushing back hard for the simple reason they want to control data. They've got incumbents in place and they're trying to protect those because big investments have been made. And also there's a cost model thing, is to get adoption in Africa, it's quite expensive. But to me, that's a little bit showing where Africa has to change, is we need to move with global rather than always pushing it off. And you know, the effect of offering satellite data to Africa would be huge. It means everybody gets access and we can move forward. Rather, let's negotiate better costing models. So I'm a little bit off cue there, but the bottom line is I'm worried that technology is moving way faster than the regulation. And how do we keep that up? And almost like Africa did, is we jumped certain payment systems to get right to the leading edge. How do we do the same with regulation? Have a good look what's out there, think of 2 years hence, and build the regulation around that. So we're actually one of the leading places to do this.
Yeah, the great benefit of hindsight, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Leah, what are your thoughts on this? It's a big question, but it's inevitable, right? We've got to have something that is enforcing responsible AI. It seems to me that it's too much just leave it up to the individual to work it out. We've got to create some sort of guidance. How do you see Africa being impacted by what's happening elsewhere, and where does it all sit?
I think we're actually on chart because we're trying to identify first where we are, where we're sitting in comparison to the globe. And I think I mentioned this earlier, the African Observatory on Responsible AI just released a project literally this past Friday. And a couple of things that they were looking at was, how do we then contextualize what's happening across the world? Because fine, everyone is already regulating, well, more predominantly Europe, but then what does this mean for us, including women, and equality around that? Because I think a lot of it, we get missed somehow in the pipeline. And part of it has to do, which is connected to one of the areas that we're talking about in the report, is about education and really building up the type of training. It's not to say that there isn't, but we need more. And that is why collaboration is key around the type of NGOs that are doing incredible work in terms of empowering women and girls in a technological space, in terms of being able to code, in terms of data science. It's important because then, very, very theoretical perspective, I always hold the view that our work often reflects, whether consciously or unconsciously, ourselves. And so can you imagine if AI then reflects a different world than what Africa looks like? And that's a problem. And that is why it's so important for us, in this particular space to take issue with and actually try and challenge. And one of the key things that's happened a while back, Africa started the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which was meant to actually just open borders in terms of trade, inter-African trade. The problem with that is obviously regulation, but if you link that particularly to what's happening now with AI, that can actually solve some of those problems around cross-border data flow. How do we make that work? How do we transform that entire pipeline to ensure that I can do business seamlessly here in South Africa with someone in Nigeria and in Ghana? And in terms of influence, I mean, we can't deny it. You look at the GDPR, and then you look at what South Africa did after with our own privacy laws. I mean, there's no way. You can't divide, but I mean, it's typical legal discourse. You learn from our peers globally, but I think, like I said, we are on the right track in the sense that you're looking at the problems, because you can't really change or move until you understand where our problems are, particularly when it comes to, for me, which I'm quite passionate about, is about digital colonization. Because when you look at it, and this is why I'm very vocal in terms of what's happening specifically in legal AI and legal technology in Africa, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're not documenting Africa's journey in terms of what's happening, because someone will come with bigger resources and whatever that looks like, and they will create their own narrative. And that's disempowering and actually, frankly, disrespectful for people who are on the ground every day doing the work. And so there's a conversation to be had around really taking ownership. And I'm glad, because you find, for example, with this report, then you find the University of Western Cape that's doing some work in AI and that's bringing people in. Then you have specific legal tech organizations here on the continent doing some research on this. So it was still very, we might be, and to Peter's words, a bit behind from a regulatory perspective. Because I mean, this is across the board, not just in Africa. Technology moves at such a pace. There's no way, but we need to find a way that actually creates a safe space to say, this is the baseline, like the global NDA. This is the baseline. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. Let's all adopt it. Wish you luck, and then we'll pivot as we move, as it goes. Like just literally agree on the core foundational aspects of it. And then the rest you figure out. But typical lawyer mentality, they want to be so specific that it actually hinders everything else. You can't, a couple of years ago, we could not have foreseen, 15 years ago, we could not have foreseen, for example, social media jobs being so huge. Such a huge thing. Even now, we could not have foreseen legal prompt engineering jobs coming up, which there are in the market, by the way. So you can't foresee everything. So ours is to agree on the foundational core, and then the rest we'll figure out as we move. Otherwise, we'll always be, oh, technology is moving ahead further and faster than the regulators.
And as you say, critically, we'll figure it out for what works for us.
Yeah.
Really important. Yeah, absolutely. Katie, just turning your mind for a sec to this conversation, but in the Middle East, I'm thinking about, the work that you do, and you're looking at all of this AI regulation coming down the pipeline, and you must be thinking, oh my goodness, here we go again, right? Almost in a way. How do you see the Middle East kind of developing in terms of the relationship with what's happening globally, but specifically with respect to the region as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say in the Middle East, there clearly is a big interest, and, lots of big investments are being made in the sort of AI market broadly. So UAE, for example, they have a national artificial intelligence strategy for 2031. And I think they issued this strategy like 6 years ago. So it's been several years, and they've been, making investments and sort of implementing different AI sort of technology to kind of, fulfill this strategy. Saudi, for example, they have their own artificial intelligence initiative. And I think their aim is to make Saudi one of the AI leaders by 2030. So you can see that in the Middle East, there is kind of a very big emphasis on this. When it comes to regulations, I think both Leah and Peter are spot on. There is a concern that, all of these developments are kind of moving very quickly, and we don't yet sort of have the full kind of complete regulations and policies in place to be able to sort of account for all of the potential risks. But that's how regulations are, right? Like as these kind of cases and developments evolve, regulations often sort of evolve with the developments. And so I think, having Europe, for example, have their own kind of AI regulation sort of come to fruition, it can only really be a benefit for us. Because we can kind of look to see how they're implementing their standards, what the difficulties and the pain points might be. If they have more sort of stringent standards than what the Middle East would have put in, that could also be sort of a learning point, or it could be a point that we sort of choose to implement in our region. I also think, Peter also touched on a very important point in that no kind of country or region operates in a vacuum. And particularly in the Middle East, there is a big emphasis for, international trade, for cross-border transactions. So if they do want, the multinational companies, the local firms here to be able to have that sort of international transaction, then we are going to have to comply with certain aspects of, EU regulations, with global regulations. And so in that way, I think, whether it's EU, whether it's US, whether it's, any other region, the regulations they have in place, that's ultimately going to affect the Middle East, just for us to be able to sort of comply with those aspects in order to be able to sort of do business internationally.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, I want to stay with you for this last question that I want to pose to all of you, because all of you work internationally, and it's I guess maybe one of the hardest questions in a way, I always find, but I've saved it for you first, Katie, right? So the question I want to ask you is what's unique? We're doing this series all around the world, so what's unique, do you think, about legal generative AI in the Middle East?
So I know we're, talking about legal AI in particular, but in my opinion, I do want to still emphasize that when we're thinking about AI, I don't think sort of the legal sector is going to be sort of at the forefront of, developments or implementation or even use cases. And so I think that legal AI in Middle East is unique, but only because AI in general is sort of unique in the Middle East. There's so many kind of investment and emphasis on AI and technology, and how the region really does believe that it will benefit sort of society and the market as a whole. And so I think if the market doesn't embrace AI and technology, then legal AI is never really going to kind of evolve. And so that's what's really sort of interesting about the Middle East. There's just an emphasis on AI in general, and I think the legal sector is sort of benefiting off of that sort of excitement. And again, I mentioned this in the beginning, we do have the benefit of, having a multinational presence, having international tech companies based here, but also having sort of local firms and local companies sort of grow up with this mindset of, AI is great, technology is great, and it's really what's going to make the Middle East sort of flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, what about you? Africa. What's unique about Africa in legal Gen AI?
Yeah, I think what makes it unique is we have an amazing talent pool. Africa generally is quite open to measured risk taking, and therefore are open to try out new things, test new things, develop new things, and get them going. So I think that's the key thing. I think the one thing we've got to be really careful about is sort of assuming we can go our own way, because as Katie said, we're part of a global world in this space, and we need to be looking what's there. How does Africa provide something really unique of what we're good at to be able to be a part of that global stage? This isn't something that you're going to develop little pockets. It's got to be a global solution. But the talent coming out of South Africa, we've developed amazing stuff in the past, and our biggest challenge is how do we take that to the global market as quickly as possible? Because I think there's some amazing solutions around. I'm seeing great stuff being developed in Africa, and I think that's really the exciting part going forward for us.
You're all absolutely right. I mean, it's hard to imagine anything that is more borderless than AI, right? It's Leah, we started with you, so it seems right that we should end with you as well. What are your thoughts in terms of what's unique to Africa in legal Gen AI?
Don't shoot me, but I think legal innovation, the bar is low. It's very, very low. When you look at it, I mean, in terms of, so you'll find, and not only, this is generally speaking, before I get to Africa, you'll find that if it's about review, it's about review here, it's about review here. If it's automation, it's about automation here. The only nuances or differences maybe will be the UX and the user experience, but the functionality at the bottom of it is the same. I think what makes us unique is actually in our languages. So you will find that legal advice is no longer just given in English. it'll be given in Swahili or in Afrikaans or in Xhosa or in Sesotho. So that's where for us, it actually comes in, and which is important. I mean, in South Africa alone, we have 12 official languages. So it's a lot.
Mhm.
And you can't exclude people from the benefits of AI simply because of language. So for me, that's what I'm seeing just from some of the startups like Luma Law that are working on this. It's more nuanced in terms of what the market needs, more contextualized, which is what I'm talking about around localizing AI for us as a community. But otherwise, in general, honestly, if you've seen it here, functionality point, you've already seen it in the US, in the UK. The only differentiators is the UX, who's on the team, how they position it and market it, BD stuff. But in general, we're still, we're not we're not there yet. But it's a big deal in any event. It's a big deal because it was slow to change. But it's a huge deal. Yeah.
None of us are there yet, by the way. It's kind of fair to say. Leah, Katie, and Peter, thank you so much for an absolutely amazing discussion. I always love spending time with all of you, and this has been no exception. Very, very grateful to you. For those of you that attended live, great to have you here. And for those of you that will pick this up as a podcast or a video, I hope that you enjoy it. I know also that Leah and Katie and Peter are all on LinkedIn. They're always open to answer questions or queries that you have. So do feel free also to follow up with them. I know that you'll enjoy those conversations as much as I've enjoyed the one today. Thank you very much, folks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.